Hi, good afternoon or morning, everyone. So we're gonna get started here. We're right at noon. So thank you everyone for joining. Both my WSP colleagues and collaborators from elsewhere. And so today we're going to be discussing, I'm joined by Rebecca from Mother Earth. We'll do introductions in a second, but thank you for joining our presentation. We're going to be discussing the development of the partnership between WSP and Mother Earth, as well as how we've been working together to address First Nation climate concerns. And as well as advancing Indigenous participation in environmental and monitoring work for other clients. So your mics have been disabled as cameras, as well as cameras, but there is a Q&A box to ask questions as well as the chat. We're joined by Vincent as well from WSP to help moderate those components. Vincent, did you need to add anything?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So we're going to start just by introducing ourselves. So I see a lot of familiar faces on the call, but my name is Amanda Doyle. I am the Indigenous Relations Lead for WSP in the Prairie region. So I've been with WSP for about 5 years now, but over my career history have worked with and for First Nations primarily in different aspects of environmental and land management. So I've been working with Indigenous communities, primarily First Nations, for about 15 years now, with a focus in environmental management. And I will pass it to my co-presenter, Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Rebecca Zalaski. I am the Director of Mother Earth Environmental Services, which is out of Whitefish, or better known as Goodfish Lake, First Nation number 128 here in Alberta. So to the left, I guess I should introduce a little bit of my background as well. So I do have a master's degree in sustainable environmental management, which is what brought me to this position here, and then working for the First Nation. So to the left here, we do have a map. So as you can see, if you can barely see the little red area there, that is the boundaries of the First Nation. It is within the traditional territory of Greater Alberta, but it is within Treaty 6 territory. So we have highlighted in blue, that is identified as the traditional territory. So in case you're not familiar with what this means, this is essentially gathered by elders, gathered by First Nation members over the years to determine the greater extent of hunting, gathering, trapping, fishing, all sorts of living off the land area that has been historically done over the years, decades, centuries by First Nation members, just to represent the larger area that our First Nation does, speak on and are concerned about environmental wise and of course with climate change.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. And I should mention I'm actually joining from Amiskosiskahikan, also known as Edmonton. So also in Alberta, about a couple hours away from Rebecca and Whitefish, Goodfish First Nation in Treaty 6. So just a little quick note or introduction to WSP. So WSP is a large environmental and engineering consulting firm. We are a global firm, but based in Canada. So our head office in Montreal. And WSP has really been fortunate to, I guess, acquire or work with other companies, namely Golder Associates. So we acquired Golder Associates in 2022, I believe, as well as Wood E&I, which has really helped us to evolve the level of our environmental services and also allowed me to get to work with Rebecca, since Mother Earth Environmental Services originally had a partnership with Wood E&I. And WSP is a company, we are committed to truth and reconciliation, call to action number 92. We are members of the Canadian Council for Indigenous Business and have silver status in the Partnership Accreditation in Indigenous Relations, or PAIR program, through that organization. So Indigenous participation, engagement, and collaboration are high priorities for WSP as a company. We operate across Canada and across the world. We do have local offices in many cities in Canada and towns. So I will let Rebecca introduce Mother Earth and the history of that business.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, so again, I am the director of Mother Earth Environmental Services. Mother Earth was established in 2020. So this is by the Goodfish Lake Business Corporation. So it is 100% Indigenous owned and operated within the First Nation and by the First Nation. So I'll give a little bit of background as to how this got established back in 2020. So the Goodfish Lake Business Corporation is essentially our economic development corporation. It has multiple divisions. This includes coverall dry cleaning, coverall manufacturing, and then also industrial laundry. It has firefighting. There's a bunch of different divisions within our ECDEV. So basically what was decided by our CEO was that we needed an environmental division basically to manage all the environmental aspects of the different divisions. So that is how Mother Earth was essentially born. And then we decided kind of we could take Mother Earth basically a lot farther than that. So it was decided that Mother Earth would branch out a little bit more into working, on behalf of the First Nation, just with different environmental assessments. This would be environmental monitoring as well. I'll go through a bunch of the projects a bit later on, but that's essentially how it got started. And then from then on, we also decided that we could branch outside of the nation as well. And that's how essentially we got started with WSP. So we needed basically assistance with capacity building, right? Because with any new startup, you're going to have issues with capacity. That is how WSP came into play for us. And we became a great partner basically for working on behalf of the nation with leadership, chief and council, and we've been in great communications with them since, just developing projects for them and answering any and all needs on their behalf. So we do support community-led environmental initiatives that align with the First Nations values and priorities. So as I kind of stated before, so this is with leadership and chief and council, but it's also with the community members. So what we also do is partner with, trying to find some youth and then trying to gain youth education in environmental consulting and environmental science, and then try get them back on so that they have a long-term career in their home nation, which would be working for Mother Earth essentially. So our mission is to remediate, strengthen, and preserve the health of Mother Earth. Respect for our planet begins with our community members. Our community contains everything to appreciate: our grasslands, forests, water bodies, and every being that we share them with. The natural world is what sustains us. Therefore, it is us that should ensure our ways of life are sustainable.
Yeah, and we should, Tom Jackson, the CEO, was actually supposed to join us here today as well, but unfortunately fell ill. So he sends his regrets, but was hoping to be here to discuss this, to discuss with us as well. I'll advance that slide. Are you, Rebecca?
So this is just like an overview basically of the main environmental and climate objectives. So this is by Mother Earth, by the First Nation leadership and community members. So some of the main ones are water quality and balance. So this would be the lakes within our First Nation and of course the water courses in between. This also includes fish population and fish health and how basically the health of fish and how the lakes are available for community members to traditionally harvest. This, the next one is also species at risk. So this could be aquatic or it could be terrestrial. Large, ones are pollinators, butterflies, bees, that sort of thing. It's kind of a widespread issue, not just within our First Nation and not even just within Alberta, but throughout the whole nation and arguably the world as well. Also changes in land cover. So land cover change is a really big one. It's essentially just how development affects the natural loss, or sorry, the loss of natural land available to use for community members, again, for traditional practices. Another one is solid waste management. So essentially how landfills operate and how those emissions can contribute to climate change. Another one is reforestation and vegetation management. So this could be things such as, of course, planting trees. And again, this could be things such as invasive species. So invasive weeds or any sort of nuisance plants that can, take over an area and also outcompete native plants. That's a big issue when contributing to climate change as well. Cumulative effects from climate change and natural resource development in a broader sense. Carbon storage is another kind of large one. Of course, being in Alberta, we're all kind of aware of the developments with carbon capture and storage that are now arising. And then again, kind of a main one that overarches into all projects that we deal with is Indigenous representation and consultation. So that's, of course, with Mother Earth being a 100% Indigenous owned company by the nation, that is one of our main focuses.
Thanks, Rebecca. Oh, too far. Um, yeah, so I guess what we're going to go into some examples of climate related projects that we've worked on together. But first I wanted to, I guess, talk about some of the pillars of the development of our relationship and of building this partnership. So I think the primary, I guess, the reason that we're working together is really mutual objectives. So a shared vision for how we can work together, advancing Indigenous participation, in monitoring environmental management, climate management, as well as accessing new types of project work and building the work that we're currently doing, particularly in northeastern Alberta, which of course is in the traditional territory of Whitefish, Goodfish First Nation. One of the other key facets of our partnership that's allowed us to do more is a fairly strong mentorship component to that. So as Rebecca mentioned, there's a lot of capacity needs at Mother Earth, especially at the outset. And WSP has been able to do a lot of training through project work as well. So, we're still working for clients, we're getting the work done that we need to, we're working for the nation or other clients, and we're able to provide training and capacity development to Mother Earth staff. And it's also a two-way street. So, WSP in turn has been able to advance how we're able to promote Indigenous participation, have conversations with our other clients about what this can look like, and build our internal capacity to really promote Indigenous participation. The structure, I guess there are some formal components to the partnership, to the relationship. So the structure of that is a memorandum of understanding, an MOU that outlines these mutual objectives, the nation's goals, the business goals, and how we can work together really with a focus on environmental and climate stewardship. To make it a little bit quicker, easier to complete project work, we also have a reciprocal master service agreement. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what that is where both parties have an MSA together, and then it makes it quite quick to do any subcontracting, especially for small scopes of work, where we don't have to involve legal in any of the contract development. And to keep this relationship going, to keep on accessing new work, we do also meet monthly. So Rebecca and Tom and I will meet monthly to discuss the work that's ongoing, see if there's any gaps, how we can address those gaps, and to discuss new opportunities. So generally, when we are doing project work together, so projects can either be led officially by WSP or by Mother Earth, depending on the opportunity. Of course, the nation and Mother Earth gets access to different opportunities than WSP would, and vice versa. Especially for nation-owned projects, Mother Earth generally leads the field-based investigations, data analysis, reporting, and WSP provides study design support to align with professional organizations, regulatory agencies, and then senior review for some of the work that Mother Earth completes. And for other client work, Mother Earth will quite often subcontract to WST to support WSP's field teams when we're out and about. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca, who's going to specifically talk about some of the climate-related work that we have done together, and then also talk a little bit about how we've worked for other clients in addition to the nation.
Yeah, so this is kind of the first one of the main projects that we will highlight here. So this is aquatic assessments of local lakes. So just as I briefly touched on earlier, so within our First Nation, there are 3 lakes of basically of significance to community members. So this would be Whitefish Lake, Goodfish Lake, as hence by the name, and then Wyatt-Nell Lake. So these 3 lakes, community members and leadership, traditional knowledge holders, elders, they're all concerned about the state of the water and fish within these lakes. So there were some issues that were happening that were quite noticeable. So for example, Goodfish Lake, the water levels drastically receded within recent years, but definitely over like decades as well. And then just very recently, Whitefish Lake, throughout the summer, there was a big summer kill. So there were a bunch of lake whitefish that washed up to shore, and they were very clearly, sick, ill, dead. We weren't sure what was going on. So that's kind of what sparked this study. So it was a multi-year assessment that we did. It was very comprehensive. So what we included was water balance, water quality. So this would be water sampling and testing for contaminants and what was really in the water. We did fish health assessments as well, fish population assessments. So identified gender of the fish, if there was any delts. So this would be like lesions, tumors, anything that kind of indicated some unhealthy fish. And then basically looked at what was going on just from a holistic sense. So the lesson learned was that climate change was determined to be a contributing factor, if not the main factor. So essentially, we determined there was nothing going on contaminant-wise in either of the lakes. So it could kind of be deduced from that. We did a large review of precipitation and just climate after that. And there was a large lack of precipitation. So Goodfish Lake is a relatively smaller lake. So if it doesn't receive the precipitation that it needs, it's, the essentially the gravel, the habitat that fish require for spawning, it's not going to be there. It's going to be now receded and dried up, and now fish lose that spawning habitat. Fish aren't going to be able to, repopulate at the rates it normally does or should be. So lack of precipitation combined with an increase in temperature. So this caused lake water levels to recede, therefore impacting fish spawning habitat. And then as for, the summer kill, it was just a one-time event, and it was related to an abnormally high temperature summer and abnormally dry summer, and the fish were just not able to get the nutrients that they needed. So all in all, we kind of deduced that it was from climate change. So we realized that ongoing monitoring does need to happen to, ensure that we protect our lakes in the best way possible that we can. And so for our next project, we're going to look at water level changes in another lake that's historically been relatively dried up within the nation. So yeah, that's where we're going to go next and continue on with the monitoring. So then another one of our projects is assessing aquatic species at risk. So again, realize that aquatic species at risk, they're very sensitive to any sort of types of changes within the climate and climate related. So any sort of habitat change will affect them quite drastically. So lake sturgeon are a fish species of significance to the nation. And these lake sturgeon are located within the North Saskatchewan River, which is within the nation's traditional territory. So populations of lake sturgeon have been under decline, and they're listed as endangered by COSWIC. So they're also considering to be added to Schedule 1 of SARA, which is the Species at Risk Act. So we, again, it's kind of similar to our last study. We did a large comprehensive assessment, basically just assessing habitat. So looking at habitat, again, it's basically about spawning grounds and where lake sturgeon are able to spawn. And the lesson learned by our assessment was that climate change was also determined to be a contributing factor. So this all relates to habitat loss and fragmentation. So this is caused by changes in flow within the North Saskatchewan River. And this impacts seasonal habitats and spawning triggers. So lake sturgeon, along with many other fish, they use spawning triggers such as temperature changes, flow changes to let them know when they need to be spawning, essentially. And with climate change and how this affects them, it can, cause changes, disrupt their natural habitat and therefore their patterns. So essentially, again, similar to the last one, we did realize that more monitoring needs to be ongoing so that we can basically keep an eye on lake sturgeon. We're hoping that they will get added to the Schedule 1, and then hopefully they can be better protected as, by federal protections as a whole. Again, another one of our major projects is land cover change. So this is the rate of change and how we can maybe predict drives to ideally slow the rate of change. So again, community members, leadership, elders, they're concerned about the apparent loss of natural lands and habitat. So this would particularly within the First Nation, it was essentially, we're losing grasslands, forests, wetlands. We're losing these essential habitats. We're seeing less moose, deer, different sorts of species of significance. What is going on? What can we do about it? So loss of these essential lands in turn affect the loss of vegetation and wildlife species. So again, this would be like traditional harvesting of berries, medicines, all sorts of plants. If the natural habitat isn't there, of course, there's nowhere for these vegetation or these wildlife species to reside in. So the lesson learned after we did again a comprehensive assessment. It was essentially, it was field-based, it was aerial-based, it was desktop-based. Also did a lot of just historical research just to see and map the land cover change over time. So again, we realized that climate change was determined to be a contributing factor. Again, it was a lack of precipitation as well as an increase in temperature. So what can happen to, of course, is this increased risk of wildfires. So there has been an increased risk of wildfires, of course, in Alberta, but throughout, the country as well. So this has touched on our First Nation, and it's absolutely coming as well. Just with, climate change, there are drier temperatures, there are drier, there's not as much precipitation as we used to get. So there are wildfires that destroy habitat, and we have seen that. And then in particular too, this is with, oh good, this is with riparian zones. And then so any sort of wetland habitat, that's been a major loss that we notice within our study. So then this is of course habitat loss of even like ducks, frogs, which are key indicator species that we need to know, signs of a healthy habitat. So basically if land cover change continues at the current trajectory, we determined that multiple vegetation and wildlife species of significance may soon reach status as threatened. So this was even species such as beavers, muskrats, again, species that live between wetlands and terrestrial environments. So our next major project is solid waste site cleanup and management. So this is a photo of our landfill project at the nation. So essentially, to help combat climate change, the nation has developed a new waste transfer station. So this leaves a legacy site to be remediated. So landfills, of course, contribute to greenhouse gas release. They emit all sorts of emissions that, need to be monitored. So the former site was not properly contained or capped. So this uncontained surficial waste contributes to unmitigated greenhouse gas emissions and contamination through leaching as well. So this does also affect soil, surface water, sediment, groundwater, all sorts of different pathways. So the lesson learned was that uncontrolled practice they can contribute negatively towards climate change. So therefore, this makes the change to sustainable practices paramount, which is now the project that we've been taking on. Surficial waste can even in addition to wildlife and whatnot, it can be a big factor. It can affect them. It can be uptaken by wind. It can be traveled, right? So we need to make sure that all solid waste is capped, cleaned up, and then proper landfill practices are ensured and established in place to help combat climate change. So another one of the projects that we have between Mother Earth and WSP is mentorship through environmental assessments. So again, we are in kind of northeastern Alberta, so it's the heart of the oil sands region. So what we have with WSP is kind of a capacity building program. So, and as Amanda touched on earlier, we do have programs between Mother Earth and WSP that go both ways. So this is essentially a focus on phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments and detailed site assessments in preliminary phases of remediation. So this is a large volume of our project work. So basically Mother Earth can be subcontracted to WSP. We can complete these assessments for multiple clients throughout Alberta. And it also works reversely where Mother Earth is WSP is subcontracted to Mother Earth. So this is to complete senior reviews and whatnot. So there's essentially a sort of training program in place for more junior employees at Mother Earth. And like I said, youth who are just starting out, WSP can kind of train them and then get them up to par, up to speed on what is needed for these environmental assessments, essentially. So WSP provides regular check-ins and guidance for Mother Earth Junior staff. And the goal here is to build internal capacity for Mother Earth and complete more work on larger projects. So essentially now how climate change affects First Nations and a sustainable environment. So the main, I guess, effect of climate change throughout the environment, it's habitat loss and degradation. So this is, again, I'm sure I've repeated quite a few times now, it's decreased precipitation and increased temperatures. And that's basically the result we found within most of our projects that we've been working on recently. So you could see a very, very clear pattern, very clear trend. And again, this causes increased events such as droughts and wildfires, which can be detrimental to habitat loss. So this affects traditional practices such as hunting, trapping, fishing, traditional and medicinal plant gathering. So this is a major concern for not just our First Nation, of course, but all the others and even non-First Nation communities, right? Like it's a big factor to consider. So this affects the abundance of sites and the access to sites. So if, First Nation members can't access a site, or if there aren't enough sites that they could practice these traditional activities on, it's a major issue. This also affects wildlife abundance and health and vegetation abundance and health. So I believe I touched on earlier as well, if there's no habitat for vegetation or wildlife to reside in, First Nation people aren't going to have access to them, and they'll have to, travel away from their families, or maybe uproot their families to be in places where there is more natural land. So there is a disconnect to the environment caused by climate change, and this results in a loss of traditional connectivity to the land and the water.
Yeah. And just to add to that, Rebecca, I think a lot of what we're seeing in the outcomes from the work that Mother Earth and WSP have done for the nation is really the compounding effects of climate with development. As Rebecca mentioned, the nation's in a pretty development heavy area in northeastern Alberta, where there's a lot of oil sands activities, traditional lands. So, a lot of the projects that we've worked on are kind of tangled up between development and climate change related challenges. So, the community is concerned by both of those factors, and there is quite a bit of overlap in how it's presented in the environment and the changes that the community is seeing. So shifting gears a little bit from the nation work that we've done and the work that we've done together, in the environmental space, and while this is still in the environmental space, what we've really been able to see, growing from these projects, is actually the ability to have even more Indigenous participation in some of the work that WSP is doing, as well as the work that Mother Earth and WSP are doing for the nation. But we've recently, and I'm sure a lot of folks are aware of this, or maybe in your own companies or objectives as well, looking to increase how Indigenous communities and people are engaged in project work and at the project outset. So Mother Earth has been supporting WSP to help advance our Indigenous participation plans within projects work. So Mother Earth is responsible for identifying and hiring field technicians to support project work. The WSP would be providing the on-site training for those technicians. And Mother Earth has been able to connect with other Indigenous groups, local Indigenous groups, many of whom, Rebecca's already familiar with, might be working with, to bring them into monitoring and assessment project work, and still being mentored by WSP. And that helps to create connections, not only for WSP to additional Indigenous groups and communities who are living in the spaces that we're working in, or who are working in their spaces, but also connections for Mother Earth to hopefully expand their resource pool, right, Rebecca? Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get more folks on the Mother Earth team. So I think, to really capture the nature of the work that we're doing and how we've been able to work together, there's really an aspect of two-way growth and learning, and kind of in these three main service areas or categories. So we really have been able to enhance our service delivery. So, of course, Mother Earth has been able to provide reliable, experienced technicians to subcontract, so to help WSP with the work that we're doing, and especially during our busy seasons, to pass some of the burden in the phase 1 and 2 ESA world, while building the Mother Earth capacity. And then the nation themselves is actually better able to address their climate and environmental concerns, having a company like Mother Earth and then a partner like WSP. So we've been able to deliver more and better service to our clients, including the nation. Increase Indigenous participation, not only from working together, obviously, on the fact that Mother Earth is an Indigenous-owned business, but be able to bring other Indigenous communities into the work that WSP is already doing, through Mother Earth's connections to those communities as well. Which of course advances our internal objectives and strategies and commitments to truth and reconciliation here at WSP. And hopefully can get Rebecca some more staff through these participation plans. And ultimately, it's leading to greater market access from a business perspective, and in a meaningful way that, we're able to communicate the Whitefish, Goodfish values to our clients. Mother Earth can access larger projects and more clients because WSP is such a large firm, and WSP is able to access more work with Mother Earth because there are opportunities that are exclusive to Indigenous communities or businesses as well. So we've really been able to grow together in this space, and it's been great. So as we're getting closer to the end here, we'll be able to have time for questions, but when it comes to developing this kind of partnership or this business, I wanted to talk about some of the tips, tricks, and lessons learned. And Rebecca, you can jump in at any time, but we've been really successful in how we've worked together. And when we were talking with Tom, who's not here today, about this last week, he was saying really it's the shared vision that was really able to get this partnership off the ground and help build that capacity for Mother Earth. But there are also some really practical things that I would put out as recommendations or lessons learned to those of you who might be interested in pursuing, a similar type partnership. Really open communication has been very important, and it's not expected that both parties will have all the same priorities and values around project work. And we have definitely run into this where, maybe the nation is not able to support a type of project that WSP would participate in. And having that open communication, regular communication, and being transparent about the types of work that you can and can't or want to pursue, I think is really important, and not being afraid of say hurting the other's feelings, but that's not really the right word in a business context. But being able to be frank about what the business priorities are. Establishing an invoice process that works for both parties. WSP is a very large firm. Mother Earth is a very small firm. And so setting up an invoicing, a financial process that works for both parties is worth it at the outset, and checking in on that process regularly. So in our case, we do meet monthly to go over, not only the project work, what we've got upcoming, but also administrative or capacity development opportunities that might come up and how we can support each other. Particularly if you are a large company like WSP, establishing points of contact for your partner business like Mother Earth to be able to check in with. It can be pretty overwhelming to think of what kinds of services, like WSP provides a lot of service. And so establishing key points of contact who are responsible for that relationship and helping get the right people at the table really helps expedite project work. We've got pretty short turnaround on some opportunities, so it's good to know the team that you're working with. And of course, finding the right people that share the same vision and can see the future of this relationship. And Rebecca and I were chatting about this presentation, and there's like all the complexities of climate change, and of course, like our work together is only a small contribution to that, to a very large issue. But we're thankful that WSP has been able to support the nation through Mother Earth to address some of those climate related issues, and it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a starting point for more work and more nation-led work in this case as well. So what's next for us? So as Rebecca mentioned, there have been some there's been historic water level changes in Reed Lake, which is a culturally important water body for the nation. So hoping to do some more work in that space, probably when it's not so frozen outside. And there actually are other Indigenous communities that were inspired by the work that Whitefish Lake First Nation has completed on their aquatic studies. So we're also hoping to work with those other communities as well in the new year to start identifying climate risks and aquatic related risks for them as well. Vegetation management. We have collaborated on some land cover projects, and we'll be looking at some reforestation opportunities in consultation with the community. And Rebecca's leading that work currently, or will be upcoming. And there is a loss of vegetation is a significant concern for the nation. And one of the more, I guess, um, complex conversations we've been having as well is about carbon capture initiatives and how Indigenous communities have been consulted and included on that. We both do a lot of work in the oil sands region, and of course, carbon capture has been a primary focus of a lot of clients in that region. But how are Indigenous communities being included in particularly the carbon sequestration, the storage of carbon in the region, because there's a lot of it happening very quickly. So it's kind of our three main focus areas coming up. Rebecca, did you want to add anything?
No, I think everything's covered, but just the one main thing, I guess, with Indigenous representation in relation to climate change. Again, climate change, as Amanda stated, it's a very complex issue, and of course, our work isn't going to combat it, nothing near. So what we're doing is just a highlight of a little bit of, what we think can be done towards it, and even just to understand it better. So I think that's been a major factor component within all the projects that we have done or intend to undertake. So that's a very large component. And I think it's very important to note too that capacity is a big part of it. So of course, Indigenous representation with regards to environmental assessments, climate change, anything related is definitely increasing. And it's very beneficial for each First Nation, but capacity is, of course, a major issue, which is how, the partnership between Mother Earth and WSP is fantastic for us. So, yeah.
Thanks, Rebecca. So this brings us to the end of our formal presentation, but of course we would be happy to answer any questions. Just having a look in the chat here, but I think most of them are just meeting note takers. Oh, I do see one in the Q&A here. Would WSP and Mother Earth consider pursuing water transfer initiatives from other basins to artificially raise water levels in the lakes of interest?
Okay, so
Becca,
I'll take that.
that's a question
That's a
for
main
you.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely. So that is something that we have been looking at. It's something in the works. It's something to think about and to consider. There's a lot of different factors that have to be considered when you do a water transfer such as that. There are also a lot of moving, I guess, entities and different groups you have to consult. So also being a First Nation, a large portion that we have to do of all of our work is through ISC. So that's Indigenous Services Canada. You have to get all sorts of approvals and like permits and everything through them as well. So it is definitely something that we've looked at. And even drawing back from that, so this was decades ago, they used to draw water from Goodfish Lake. So that's what started essentially the whole depletion in the lake water levels. So if we could replenish that through a water transfer, that would be fantastic. So yes, that is a great question. That is something that we are looking into, and I really hope it's possible and feasible for us to do. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Are there any other questions either about, the project work that's happened, what we're doing in the future, or any questions, I guess, about the establishment of the relationship or? Vincent, you're not seeing anything either, hey?
I think you can whether answer the question that yeah, a frequently asked question that you guys come up usually.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was Tom had great ideas for that. Um, but yeah, what were we thinking of some of the frequently asked questions?
Or you can go with the final word, Amanda.
Yeah, so there's no, I think Tom was anticipating getting some more questions
Yeah.
about the history of setting up an Indigenous-owned business. I don't know if we have any Indigenous business owners here, but I think that's what we were anticipating questions about. But if there are no other questions, then maybe we will keep it shorter and sweeter and give folks back 15 minutes of their time. Rebecca, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Oh, Amanda, there's
New
a
post. Oh,
question from Michael.
Oh, is WSP doing the same with any other communities? Yes, similar. I mean, not exactly the same, obviously. Each kind of partnership is unique, but we do have established relationships with mentorship components across Canada, actually. And I can see that a few of my colleagues here, the Indigenous relations leads from other regions, are also on this call. But yeah, so we do similar work in the north, in Saskatchewan, and yeah, across Canada.
I
So, but
guess
of
that's
course,
a
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead, Rebecca.
I didn't mean to cut you off there, my bad.
No, no.
This would be a good point to kind of highlight how I kind of work as an Indigenous liaison on behalf of WSP, just for one of the projects that we've been working on and are looking to do more. So essentially what happens is WSP subcontracts Mother Earth. And so what I do then is liaise with other First Nations communities, and then gather First Nations fieldwork participants for different environmental fieldwork projects. So I'm kind of I guess, the middleman, liaising between different First Nations communities. So it really kind of connects all the communities together back to WSP.
Yes, yeah. So it's been great. So
Mhm.
we've of
Yeah.
course been able to work with more communities through our partnership with Mother Earth. Rebecca, there's actually a question in the chat for you as well, asking from Nicole. Is Indigenous services where much of the study funds come, or are there other sources? I think most of your stuff is ISC funded. Hey, although you got some provincial.
It really depends. It's really project specific and project dependent. And even ISC too, like ISC, they'll put out different grants and whatnot each year, but it's not consistent, if that makes sense. So if one year there's a grant, next year it might be gone and there's no potential for refunding or anything. If you do have a project that is specific and there aren't any grants or any sort of thing that you can find that will fund that project, I think then as a last resort, that's how you kind of reach out to ISC and ask for their assistance, or maybe they have resources or know of something that will work for you. But yeah, ISC, I would say it's a large part of it, just even in conversation. But as for funding, hard to say. Like I said, very project specific. There are a lot of funding opportunities out there, and even a lot of them are First Nation specific. So if you kind of have the right contacts, and so this would be also a very main one is Environment and Climate Change Canada and DFO, so the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. They both put on a lot of grant programs, and like I said, specific to First Nations as well. And they're more than willing to work with you to help you develop a proposal, a sort of project design, anything that you might need. There's a lot out there. And then, a lot of people don't know about that. And they also kind of just think, oh, well, maybe you do just have to go to ISC. But that's not the case. There's, opportunities everywhere as long as you have the sort of capacity to know, where to look and how to develop these sort of proposals and project design. Like I said, you can accomplish like a lot of different projects, a lot of different things, kind of all over the place across the board. So
I
lots of
think
different
yeah, I think a
options out
lot
there. Yes.
A lot of the funding for the community projects has come from Environment Canada, or the First Nations environmental contaminants, or I guess it was BAFI was the other one, right? But
So
yeah,
that's through
federally.
ISC. Yeah.
Yeah. So federally funded, either through ISC or through Environment Canada, federally funded programs for a lot of the community-owned work. And then, of course, the other client work that we do together is, of course, client-based work.
Mhm.
And there are, Nicole, I don't know if you're with WSP, but yes, Nicole, reach out. We actually do have some internal tools to look at available grant programs too at WSP. Are there any other questions? No? Well, thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. And yeah, you've got Rebecca and my at least LinkedIn information there. And please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions or want to explore anything similar. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.